podcast, everybody. So where are you listening today? Are you stuck in traffic? I don't know, you're out running. Maybe you're smashing it in the gym. Perhaps you're the envy of all of us and listening while you're lying on a beautiful beach in some amazing part of the world. No matter where you are or what you are doing, welcome to my podcast. And thanks again for taking the time to listen. Now, if I was to give any clues of today's guest and I said to you, there's a doctor in the house, well, to be honest, I'd be lying. However, if I said to you, there's a food doctor in the house, I would still be lying and I'd be talking utter nutribolics. Now, listen, please forgive the swearing, but it's extremely relevant to today's guest because he is on a mission to expose people in the nutrition world who are putting out what he refers to as totally misleading nutribolics. I can, of course, only be talking about best-selling author and all-round nutritional god. It's the one and only Ian Marber, everybody.
I'm not going to applaud myself.
No, I know, you can't.
That's very nice, thank you.
Okay.
But yeah, I must say that what you said about individuals there, about showing up people, nutribolics is never about individuals, it's about the claims. And what I do is make sure it's never personal. Because
and for those that don't know, by the way, there'll be several people listening to this that won't be aware of
course, there'll be thousands of people listening
nutribolics,
who won't be aware
but I want
of
them to become aware of it because I think it's a very important thing. For those that don't know, I've been aware of Ian Marber's work for many, many, many years. He's somebody I've admired for many years. And what's wonderful, what I wanted to get Ian on for, I spoke about this just before we started recording. We don't agree with every aspect when it comes to health, nutrition and certain things, but nutribolics is something that I definitely agree with him that needs to be exposed. And actually, to be fair, if I look back at, I've been doing this for 20 years and sometimes I look back at some of the stuff that I've written and I look back and think, oh, that could probably be put down as nutribolics.
Me too. I look back at my very early work and I put it down, and I know it was actually enthusiasm more than anything else. It was
and it's passion, isn't it?
It was passion, but looking back on it, passion is marvellous and enthusiasm is marvellous, but there's got to be a fair degree of hubris, which perhaps I lacked in the very early years.
There's a word I didn't think I'd hear, first thing on my podcast for sure.
Just a bit of humility and understanding that just because you really believe it doesn't actually mean it's accurate.
And just to fill everybody in again, right? So if you go to Ian Marber's Twitter account, Instagram account, all the links will be there as well. Is it every week pretty much you do?
I'll tell you, every Friday I do a poll, and nutribolics, forgive the words, it's nothing new, it's not something I invented, it's not something I meant to take on, as it were. It's been used extensively by Pixie Turner, Joshua Woolrich, talking about claims, posts, products that have ridiculous health claims. And on the surface, it can be very funny, but there's always a darker side to it. What I do is people kindly send nominations and I pitch two, one against each other every Friday. And it's the Nutribolics poll. It started off with a couple of 100 people voting, and now it's sort of 500 or 600. But I look at the figures on Twitter that it tells you how many people, and there's sort of 30,000 people are engaging with it.
Wow.
Like a lot of things, it started out of a bit of fun, but it's really just a way of highlighting how bad some claims can be and also understanding the darker side to them, because it's all very well if someone says, I don't know, my diet, you can lose 11 kilos in 29 days, which was the one from last week. But let's say someone genuinely believes that that's possible. And of course, they're not going to lose that amount of weight in a small amount of time. It engenders a feeling of failure. It engenders the feelings they should try harder, that it's their fault. But it's the people who make ridiculous claims, not understanding that the outcome for the end user can be quite dark. And we have a responsibility, all of us, with our claims, to be much more caring and solicitous and respectful of the people, of our listeners, our viewers, our readers, whatever they may be.
And do you find it hard sometimes as well that when you look, whether it's science-based or non-science-based, of course, over the years, even when we look at science-based nutrition and you go back, it seems to be that every 10 years, everything can be deemed, even by the eminent scientists in this field, that you could argue the case. If you went back 20 years, if you went back 30 years, you could have started a Nutribolics poll now about those claims back then by the medical profession and sometimes by dietitians and nutritionists. One of the ones that springs to mind, of course, is people are very, very confused when it comes to saturated fat and heart disease and so on. And it's not a clear-cut thing. So who's doing the Nutribolics? Does it cause it? Doesn't it cause it?
Well,
and that's just one element.
But don't you think, though, that implies that there's a yes or no, black or white answer? We have to understand a lot of the health advice we get previously, when there was no social media, came from government having done population-wide studies and having understood that there are nuances, but we need to give some clear advice here. So the best knowledge we have is to avoid saturated fat or to limit it to X grams a day. Now we know that saturated fat is not as bad as we thought. I don't think that the original claim or the original advice is therefore nutribullics. I think it was the best advice we had at the time. There's no way that some of the claims that can be made that we look at and we kind of laugh at today is the best advice.
No, but it's not always put out that way. I mean, you say that science always has the get out clause, obviously, anyway, in the sense that it's hypothesis until proved up.
And it's also ever changing, and that's the whole point about research.
No, of course, I understand that. But sometimes it's put out as fact. You said it's never really put out as fact, but it is sometimes. You know, the government body will say, this does that, this causes that.
But don't you think they have to say that?
But not the way that you put it.
No, but the population, I make it sound as if I'm not part of the population. There are some people in our little world who are very, very engaged with health messages and health advice. But the majority of people are not. So they get very simple health messages. And so to be told, you can have a bit, but not too much, and we think it might be bad for your heart, that's not a clear enough message. So I think that the messages have been claimed to be more direct, more certain on advice that wasn't certain, because that's the best they could do. We have to tell the general population, you know, people want to know, right or wrong, yes or no, can I eat it or not? Rather than just, you can eat a bit, but maybe not too much, too many times a week.
But you can't say, if you don't know it for certain, then even if you're a scientist or eminent body or a dietitian, you can't then give certainty to somebody just because that's the advice that we want to give.
It's not necessarily want to give it. The best advice that someone will understand, I was talking about this just now, about the outcome, how the person at home is going to interpret it, is to give advice that means something. Now, if you ask people, they say, well, can I eat it, yes or no? And you go, well, some. Because in this day and age, with social media and with health claims, saying you can have a bit here and a bit there, or have a modest diet, or have a balanced diet, that's not really a message. You're never going to get followers. You're never going to get liked for things like that. Saying you mustn't do it, or you definitely have to do this, is much stronger, and you're going to create an audience and a tribe. And that's the way we're becoming, is more and more tribal.
But that was also, I would argue, of course, that even without social media, if you go back, as you said, certainty creates a tribe. And then you say, on the other hand, that dietitians at the time, they can't be willy-nilly, they have to give that absolute certainty. And fat being what? Forget saturated fat for a second, but the whole, Ansel Keys, one experiment, he wrote up one paper, and all of a sudden it becomes an anti-fat propaganda. I don't understand how it seemed to be the entire Western world was hoodwinked by one study, and everybody cited it all the time, and that was the proof that fat causes you to get fat, like fat is the cause of fat. And then we still have this ratio of fat, protein and carbohydrate and calories, and it all seems very antiquated. And you said it's always changing, but some of them don't change. The body mass index doesn't change.
Oh, the body mass index is like a blunt tool.
No, but it doesn't take into account muscle mass. But the point is, most people don't know that. So the medical profession will give certainty, but if that certainty is wrong, isn't it equally as bad as the people on Instagram giving that certainty that's wrong as well?
I would like to think the people who gave the advice all those years ago didn't just accept blindly the information they were giving. And I think that with the benefit of hindsight, and as time goes by, we can look at health claims that seem very definite at the time. We don't know the history. We don't know all the history of it. And I still maintain, yes, a lot of people were hoodwinked, a lot of people gave poor advice, but it wasn't 100% wrong. And I also don't think that a lot of the dietitians and the nutritionists that filtered this advice effectively were doing it to get followers or sell books. And I think that's the part that we have to be aware of here, is that a lot of people, and we'll talk through some nutribullics posts a little later on if you want, a lot of people are doing it specifically to sell a product.
Yeah, well, that has changed over the years, obviously.
Definitely.
But at the same time, it's so confusing for the average person.
Okay, well, let's follow up on that. It's confusing. So it's confusing as having lots of different dietary advice. So if you look back, we didn't want people, I still talk as if I'm part of the establishment and I'm not, but we, being a recipient of advice, wanted direct, clear advice. And I do think that it was, I can see how it
those that
happens.
argued against it at the time and would say, no, that effectively is absolute nonsense, but they weren't qualified dietitians or anything else, they would be belittled. And I wrote about fat 16, 17 years ago, very clearly in one of my first books. Now, bear in mind, obviously I get hammered a lot. And especially at that point, it was like, how can this guy write this? HarperCollins, how could you have even printed it? And it got hammered because...
But you, by a handful of people, maybe by a handful of noisy people, but most people
noisy
would have
people
read it.
with qualifications that I didn't have at the time. And so therefore it was, how are you putting out this information?
I've got my qualification. I'm a nutrition therapist, and I would say that with the invention of year-long online courses and fairly crappy qualifications, mine's better than it used to be. But, back when I studied nutrition, there was a lot of taking things on trust. I remember in one particular lecture, we were told by someone very famous that apples were sprayed 22 times. And, there was a pause as he looked around the room, and a room of 80 people nodding went, ooh.
Right,
I don't know what the cartoon, the animated things are, but whatever the Minions, like, ooh.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, hang on a second, surely if they've applied a bit of logic to it, well, they're not sprayed maliciously. They're sprayed so that you have a uniform crop, because we know that people like to buy apples of a certain size and a certain colour. So they're sprayed to make them last the journey, to be able to, they're not sprayed out of some sort of nasty way.
No, and in the same guise that you mentioned, and I do take your point in the sense that the people that was putting out the information, there was no malice, there was no to get more followers on Instagram because it didn't exist. So I suppose the bigger picture therefore is that now and I'm not conspiracy theorist at all, not even in the nutrition world. In fact, actually, I'm the opposite of that. But actually, there's a lot that I've read over the years that obviously now the information that comes down was being manipulated by, sugar was even kept off the World Health Organization mantra for 10 years by people like Elsie and various other bodies. So therefore it's very difficult for then, once it's filtered down, they say, right, this is the science, this is the information. But if that science has been manipulated, I guess we're all in trouble.
I do think it's a little bit like a supertanker, that we as individuals or small groups, becoming tribal as we have become, can change our minds, can adopt a theory, can run with it, can really become enthusiastic about it. We're talking about government bodies here that it's like a supertanker. They can't just change overnight. Has to be slow, has to be a lot of people influencing it. And that's the problem, is that because effectively our mainstream nutrition advice is based on information.
And there is a lot of, like you said, a lot of misinformation on nutribolics, which I love the term, by the way. And I often vote in your thing as well. And it was interesting, because before we came on, I said, I thought years ago, whenever it was that you started it, I thought juicing also came into nutribolics. And then you quite rightly corrected me before we came on and said, actually, no, the claims. It was the
would have been a claim about one particular juice. I don't remember what it was, although I've got every single Nutribolic post screenshotted on my phone.
And of course, any time there's some post about juicing, making ridiculous claims, whatever it is, like the celery juice frigging thing.
I just saw one now. It's like celery juice can heal addictions.
It can't. No, it's genius. Did you not know this, Ian?
No. I've got. Listen, celery juice is redoing my roof at home as we speak. It does everything. But let's talk through what that claim means, if you don't mind. That let's say that someone is concerned about their intake of something, alcohol, and they're ashamed of it, they hide it, whatever situation they may be in, and they read that. You don't have to be stupid to believe it, and there's always assumption that these things are, only taking the gullible. That's not the case at all. And instead of actually getting help, discussing it, making serious inroads into your situation, you just drink celery juice. You can fix it with vodka. In other words, who knows? Because people are making wild claims, and other people are taken in, and they're not getting the help, sometimes medical, sometimes emotional help, that they truly need and require, and will get a significantly better outcome.
And the point that you said, they often feel like a failure as well, because it's something like you said that
if it's to do with weight. Yeah, if it's to do with weight. Look at cancer victim. Some of the language is very unfortunate, and then there's a battle. I'm beating cancer. So, which is you can understand really how empowering that may be, but look at the darker side of it. In other words, look at the other person in the equation. Someone who may feel they're not beating cancer. Someone who may feel that actually they're not doing enough. They could have done more. It's their fault.
Yeah, no,
there's an element which is really dark. You had it coming because you didn't do what you should have done. Oh, well. And that's really unpleasant. Yeah, and imagine what that does to someone's spirit.
Because anybody who actually understands cancer of any description knows how indiscriminate it is. And the challenge, like you said, is if somebody believes that if only you just drank a few green juices or you'd done this or whatever the case is, that actually, I agree with you. I think it's one of the really dark sides to this. So when it comes to it, because you've got some examples, I asked Ian to bring out some examples of nutribolics and get involved with the poll, obviously, because like I said, there is a darker side to some of this. So it is worth bringing these people to task. Some, of course, have got almost too big to take to task, but hopefully the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And we're talking about
they used to be mediums, now they're enormous.
Yeah, now they're enormous, and we'll talk about goop in a minute.
Right. Okay, well, let me someone, there's a post said, fat-burning detox drink before bed to lose 10 pounds in 1 week. Okay, now we can all make jokes and say, well, actually, it's obviously a laxative. But let's say that you're sold the idea that you're toxic and that's why you're fat. Let's say you're sold the idea that you can lose 10 pounds in 1 week. Well, if you don't, then perhaps you'll actually eat less during the day. It's your own fault. So that's a sort of minor one. There's one...
Did that win, by the way, that week?
I actually don't remember the ones that won. There's one or two that had extraordinary results. The one that comes up quite a lot, and there's one that I saw, the benefits of asparagus. What I don't like is when there's a post that actually stops you eating a good food. So I have to be careful about it. I don't just chuck them on willy-nilly. I always, grand word here, redact them so that the individuals are unidentifiable, because I think it's really unfair.
Yeah, I've noticed that, because you're not picking on the individual, you're picking on the client.
It's absolutely not about the individual. I would like to talk to you about social media, is that if I've got a product and we know that there are EFSA, European Food Safety Authority, approved health claims, and we are going to adopt those when we leave the EU, and I know that I can't say this product, let's make it ridiculous, this product will make you taller. So anybody under 6 foot wants to be over 6 foot. I do too.
I'd buy it.
Yeah. Well, okay, it's going to make you taller. Now, I know that that's not a legal claim, and everyone knows it's not a legal claim. But I can actually sell a product for a lot of money to people who think you're going to make them taller. So I can't make that claim. But what I can do is go to someone on social media, and everyone's desperate for content. Doesn't have to be a nutritionist or anyone involved in the health world. Someone with 200,000 or 300,000 followers, someone who looks great. And I can then send them the product because they're desperate for content, and they can put ad on it or not and say, I'm really excited. I do feel taller. They try, so excited to try this. Now, I've got them to repeat my rubbish. And so now it looks like an endorsement, or at least someone on my side, being a social media user, someone I relate to, thinks this is good. Well, I'm going to try it because I trust them. So instead of the marketing that companies used to have to do, you now are able to, I don't want to say you're able to mislead someone on the basis of they get a freebie and they're looking for content and things to say and things to talk about.
But also, do you think that what should happen? Because the tallness, obviously, that's you can't actually.
Okay, well, how about weight loss?
You can't. This is the point. This is it. So what you mentioned, or anything like this. But also, I would take that even further to aging creams and various other things. I don't see there's any difference personally when I see somebody of a much older generation, and all of a sudden this new aging creams come out, and then they put it on and they go, "Look how I look." You've only just started using the cream, so clearly that can't be the reason why.
Yeah, let's go back 20 years. Let's find out what you're really doing 20 years ago, because that's what made the difference.
That's what made the difference. Yeah. Do you think something has to come in? Like, for example, I've got footballer's legs. It's the only probably part of my body I like, and I've got footballer's legs, right?
Oh,
because I used to play a lot of football. Now, I could potentially, if I wasn't in the world that I'm in, I could get any exercise product. I could literally have something that works the legs or do trim.
Oh, right.
And then
say, look at my legs.
And say, look at my legs, and I've been doing this, which gives the very false implication that this is the reason why I've got the legs that I have. So do you think that we need to reach a stage, this is what I feel, I think there needs to be a campaign of it somehow, what better person to lead it than Ian Marber, but the person advertising they have to have proof that they've done it. Like, instead of doing a DVD, weight loss DVD, and then actually using laxatives to get the result, which is a few people got into trouble for that.
Celebrities and reality stars have done that, less so now, but over the years, and then talked about their weight loss hell several years later, having sold another story, having made more money out of their confessions.
Well, somebody got into real trouble for it last year. Somebody
really?
who, in fact, most people would know, she was very well known on TV, and it caused controversy.
I sound like an old fogey. I don't watch television.
No, I understand
that.
But she'd been on various other things, and there was this big thing about this weight loss DVD, and the before and afters were extraordinary, to say the least. But of course, it wasn't the exercise during those things that had done it.
But it's an interesting point, isn't it? There's sort of honesty in advertising, that when you see Helen Mirren advertising a cream.
Actually, that's who I was referring to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was actually referring to
Helen Mirren using a cream. Well, obviously, she's not there as a standard, 70-year-old. She's there as who she is. We're used to celebrities, and that way of advertising effectively is selling the celebrity more than the product, which is why they got the celebrity in the first place. The sort of level of marketing that we're talking about, or I'm talking about with some of these ridiculous posts and claims, are not necessarily celebrity. They're someone who you might relate to. And by the way, a lot of them are about sex. I mean, we can claim that they're not. If you look, there's a couple of personal trainers I know who have a big following. And if you look at their posts, when the blokes have their shirts off, they will get 5,000 likes.
Yeah.
And when they have their shirts on and they're talking about something else, and the photograph is of them, or not necessarily them, they'll get 200 or 300. Why is that? We know sex sells. We know it's about looks. We know it's superficial things. And social media marketing is very superficial.
You're clearly a better person than I, because what triggered me to do a little series I've got on my YouTube channel called Jason on his Juice Box was somebody put an Instagram post up. I wasn't copied in on the Instagram post. I wasn't tagged in. So it was a cowardly thing anyway. This guy had put up 2 pictures, and it brings me on to discuss the word detox, because I think it's important that we discuss that word in itself and whether that's a misleading claim and so on. So he put a picture of a liver up and the picture of one of my books up. And he literally put real against the liver and bullshit against my book. Oh. And then he wrote the text, right? So
why was he singling yours out?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he was singling it because I think it said something like 5-day detox. We call them challenges now. So he obviously said the liver's the only thing can detox, not the only thing, but part of the organs. Right. And that's the route he was going down. But he clearly hadn't read the book, because if he'd read the book, in there, I had an entire chapter on the word detox, and actually why my belief is, over the years, the uniformed understanding of that word has ultimately changed. And I'll talk about that in a second. But it's in the book. So I confront it, I talk about it, and clearly
What's the title of the book?
Now it's called the 5-Day Challenge. I think it was called the 5-Day Detox or something like that.
But obviously, look, that tagline, that is what sells the book. So he was challenging the words that sell it. No, and I understand that, he hadn't read it, but I mean, how many people criticize things that they know very, very little about anyway? I think that's perfectly common in our world.
Yeah, but I think if you're going to critique a book, surely...
It wasn't a fair critique. It was really just selling the idea of just saying to people, in my mind, I don't know, I can't read his mind, I would say it's an idea of saying, look, don't do this, don't worry about this sort of stuff, because actually your liver does the detox. But one thing that I've learned in 20 years like you of doing this is that when we want marketing to work for us, we have to understand that sometimes it's going to backfire, or at least there's going to be another side to it. Sure. So in the same way that your publishers, back in the day when you published that book, thought that it'll be a really good sell to have, 5-day detox, that some people may actually take exactly the same words and not enjoy it. So we're using that to sell a book, 5-Day Detox, not in a miserable, cynical way, but we're using it to market the book, get into the hands of the people that are actually going to enjoy it and relate to it. But at the same time, there's always going to be people that don't.
No, I understand that. I get that, and I understand.
Do you want me to go and have a word with him?
Well, if you can, yeah.
I mean, I am 5'9",
But he wants me to remove it from the YouTube channel, which I'm not about, because that's
Why should you?
The point is now, if you're going to do that, I have my right to reply. So that's how it is these days, and we have a right to reply.
Oh, saying that you're not allowed to use his post?
No. It's just the fact that the fact that I'm ranting about him, and just because I'm a bit
having a juice box if you're not going to use it.
Because I'm a little bit touchy. That's what it is. It's funny because I was in a radio studio, and I don't think I can mention the guy that I was with, but he's a larger gentleman and a food critic, and I didn't know him, and we're just trying some juices with Gabby Roslin, and we're just having a chat on the radio, and then she said, "Oh, what do you think of the juices?" And then he said, "Well, the juices taste all right." He said, but I don't agree with him being on here. Right. So this was now live radio BBC. So this was interesting. And then I said, why is that? He said, the world's biggest juice detox. Da, 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 da. I said, are you going to pick on the name? Okay, I get it right. He said, the liver detoxifies the body. Bear in mind, this guy's huge, right?
Is he a medic?
So no, he's not a medic. He's a food critic. And he's quite large. So I had to stop. I haven't got a checkpoint between my brain and my mouth because when I was, although I did this day, I was on the BBC. But when he said, the body does all the detoxing for you. And I nearly went, well, it's not working very well for you, is it? But I know what he meant in terms of the toxicity. But I said, none of the books that I've ever written have I ever said juicing detoxifies the body. And so we've changed the word now. We don't actually use the word detox anymore. And the reason for that is not just because of this man's comment or the guy from Instagram, is because actually the ones that get annoyed, the medics or dietitians or nutritionists that get annoyed about that, the layperson doesn't tend to. And the layperson, my theory is, the understanding, if you ask the average person in the street, what does detox mean? What does it mean to you if you said you're going on a 5-day juice detox? They say detox normally means a period of time where you're abstaining from certain foods or drinks.
You made an interesting point there, which I'm going to take you up on. What something means to the average person on the street. Let's go back to the original dietary advice that we started talking about at the beginning. What does it mean to someone on the street to say, okay, I think you shouldn't have saturated fat because we think it causes heart disease? That's not enough. The person on the street needs to hear direct advice. And so going back to our original point, it's always about the end user. And I take your point. The person, I don't know anybody who's done a detox who actually, I wonder if they think they've actually detoxified. And I would say that in the same way that I'm bored of reading posts how to get through a healthy Christmas or Valentine's or Easter. Chocolate can be good for you. I mean, I wrote an article for the Express in about 1820 about chocolate being good for you, and I swear I could literally cut and paste it and write it, and I have written it again many times and tweaked it because it doesn't change. The process of making chocolate, the polyphenols in it, they don't change. So detox has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm, and if I see one more post from some equally willing, either medic or otherwise, saying, no, your liver detoxes, I think most people know that. It's when somebody sells a product specifically implying that you're toxic. And that's the dark side of it. So I understand, I take your point, a detox, 5-day, just a full stop, new paragraph under other behavior. I totally understand that. But when somebody has sold the notion that their illness or their condition is because they're toxic, and if they don't detox, it's their own fault. That's a different side to it. And that part we have to understand, again, is about the end user, about looking at the darker side of some of the claims. Not yours, but some of the more ridiculous claims.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, the publisher, because sometimes you're led and sometimes you end up signing a contract with the publisher and ultimately you realise you have no jurisdiction or say over the...
You have less say than you'd like,
over the cover, potentially. We had a huge argument before the book, which was originally called, it's not called it anymore, which was called 7 Pounds in 7 Days, Super Juice Diet. And we had huge arguments. My first book was called Freedom from the Diet Trap, all psychology, all about the addiction to food. And I studied addiction psychology. Juicing played such a tiny part of what I did, only because you can stop smoking, you stop drinking, you can't stop eating. But you can change your brand of food. And if you can't eat it, can you drink it? Yeah. I dealt with somebody who was 32 stone once. I laid out all the food that we were going to have for him to juice for a month. And he had gout, he had type 2 diabetes, and he said, well, why don't I just eat it? I said, it's a good question. I don't know why you don't, but you clearly don't, do you? So we need to find another way. And to me, it's just a catalyst. But we had this argument about 7 pounds, 7 days. They ended up keeping it because they were the publishers, so they could. I was annoyed. I said, well, I'm going to write at the beginning of the book how I didn't want this title. But it's too late then because the title was already there. I mean, I get that point. Yeah. But I wrote this thing, and then I put a phase 2 and a phase 3 in it to make sure that it was not about the 7 days. I mean, that's a short fix. But getting that point across on the cover, I couldn't. But the point is that you think that if it attracts the serial dieter, but actually once they get it, actually in there is psychology that prevents them from serial dieting thereafter, but it looks like there's something that they would be attracted to.
It's like the personal trainer with his shirt off. You've got to sell it. I mean, the publishers have got to sell it. And, I understand that. And also, there's an interesting thing about publishing, which I certainly didn't know until I published a book. It's effectively a licensing deal. You are selling the copy. Not a copy. You are selling the prints, all your words, to a publisher who binds it up and sells it on.
Man Food, I've recently read. I disproportionately liked it. Right? So I want to get you on the podcast. And I would say to anybody to read it, quite frankly, but obviously if you're a dude.
The reason I wanted to write a book for middle-aged men, 40s and above, is I think that we are grossly overlooked when it comes to health. And we are grossly overlooked sometimes by ourselves. And I think that there's so many stats about men eat more saturated fat, they eat fewer vegetables, they chew food less times, they're more likely to involve in risky behavior, including with diet. There are so many stats about that when it comes to emotional health, men are more engaged and increasingly so. When it comes to dietary health, I think we're less involved because it's either Men's Health magazine, it's all abs and biceps, or it's retired people, Viagra, and playing golf while looking out into the sunset and thinking about your pension. If you're 60 or 70, there's nothing in between.
More than anything else here was this, it's almost like a halftime team talk for a guy. We're halfway through. And actually what's wonderful is the nutrition. In the same way that trying to do HIIT training when you're 15 or 20 or 30 is fine, trying to do HIIT training when you're 70, you're going to bugger your knees up. We need different things at different decades and different times. And what your book illustrates beautifully is the different types of nutrition, the different types of supplementation. Actually, it's worth paying attention now to this. And I would genuinely say any guy in particular out there that is not even thinking about the health, but they reach 40, 50, I'm 50 now, I've just turned 50, and you just think, I just need a halftime team talk because actually it's the most important thing in the world.
And also, what's interesting is that if you look at the sort of media that women consume, they are likely to come across articles that feel very personal. We look at the sort of media that men consume. Where are they?
No, it's just abs.
Yeah, it's abs. Look at something like GQ. Look at something like Esquire.
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't get coverage. Now, I got them online, but I was told, not our audience.
No.
Well, who do you think your audience is?
Somebody doesn't want to really know about nutrition.
Yeah, but fair enough, I understand that. But then, so where do men look at men's health? Men's health is how to get more sex and how to eat more protein. I'm being flipped there. I don't really know what it's about. I haven't seen it for a long time. But it's not about health for men, bizarrely.
Well, whereas that particular book is. Of all the books you've ever written, Ian, which one would you say? Obviously, if you're a dude, definitely go and read that. But what other one would you say?
There's two. Man Food is the one, and the other one is How Not to Get Fat.
Okay, when
which
did
is
that come out?
preventative. 2009, 2010, something like that.
And then, of course, How Not to Get Fat Daily Diet. I mean, it becomes a franchise. It's always good.
Yeah, well, no, that was How Not to Get Fat was here's why we gain weight.
Was that the TV show as well?
No, that was
because you do so much television. I know you was on This Morning for years.
No, it was Rich and Judy on Channel 4. I did
yeah.
actually, I think the first week they were on, and I was the last item on their last show, so I did 7 years. It was fantastic
Did you really?
fun.
Yeah.
How Not to Get Fat was, look, here's what it's all about. And then people said, yeah, but what do we eat? And I said, no, you need to understand the theory. It doesn't matter if you're going to have Weetabix and roast beef. If that's what you want, as a protein and carb, you can be as maverick. No, we want. And so the publisher said, we did keep getting emails saying, what do I eat? So I thought, well, I'll have to do a plan.
So How Not to Get Fat, and you have Man Food, of course, is out there. Nutribolic's poll is out most weeks. It depends what.
Occasionally take a Friday off.
It depends. Yeah, occasionally takes a Friday off. Follow Ian Marber on Twitter, on Instagram. What I love about it just takes away some of the, there's no other better word. I mean, it's an English word. It's wonderful. Nothing else sums it up more than bollocks. It's just, and sorry for anybody listening who gets offended.
If this were broadcast radio, I couldn't say that word. On the back of that, I now write a column in The Telegraph about these sort of claims, which has come around from that, I had a column in The Telegraph many years ago, and that's been resurrected. And I keep getting calls from newspapers and things saying, will you write a piece with your 10 favourites? So, it is interesting. And as I said, it's never poking fun. It's never personal. It's about looking at the darker side and understanding more about the responsibility that we have.
Well, the good news is that Mr. Ian Marber not only has come on my podcast, which is really lovely, but also we know that he's not anti-juice entirely. He's just anti-juice claims that are ridiculous, like the celery stuff. But it's also worth knowing that he's a master of the juice himself, because not that long ago, of course, he helped Innocent Smoothies, no less, to produce some super smoothies himself.
That's right. That was 2012. That was a fantastic project.
And there we were. I couldn't believe when I read that. I thought,
I think they're the best-selling smoothies.
Mr. Ian Marber, but to call them super smoothies, I've only got one word to say. I think that's a touch of Nutribolic. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ian Marber, everybody.